Hey everyone, welcome back to Living Beyond the Invisible, A Walk with Heather, the podcast that sheds light on the realities of living with invisible disabilities. I'm your host Heather, and today's episode is called Truth in Advocacy. Today, we're diving into a topic that is truly the heartbeat of this entire podcast, the importance of advocacy and awareness for those living with invisible disabilities. I'll be unpacking what invisible disabilities are, why they're so misunderstood, how awareness can shift social perceptions, and why advocacy isn't just important, it's vital. We'll look at the impact of stigma, discrimination, and isolation, and we'll also spotlight the progress we've made and the distance we still have to go. Let's start by defining our terms. What exactly is an invisible disability? And I know we covered this in an earlier podcast, but I feel it's important to have all of this right here in this one so you understand fully. According to the Invisible Disabilities Association, an invisible disability is a physical, mental, or neurological condition that is not visible from the outside, yet can limit or challenge a person's movements, senses, or activities. These can include conditions like chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, ADHD, lupus, autism, PTSD, Crohn's disease, and many, many more. Now, here's something that might surprise you. According to the CDC, about 1 in 4 adults in the U.S. live with a disability, and many of those disabilities fall under the category of invisible disabilities. Despite their prevalence, these conditions are often met with skepticism, disbelief, or outright dismissal. And that brings us to our next point. Why awareness matters. Let's take a moment to consider what it means to live with something you can't prove on site. Imagine being in pain every day, but hearing you don't look sick, or asking for accommodations and being told, but you seem fine. Or maybe it's worse. Maybe you're accused of faking it or exaggerating for attention. I have been. That's the reality for millions of people. Disbelief isn't just frustrating, it's harmful. A study published in the Journal of Health Psychology found that people with invisible disabilities reported higher levels of stress, anxiety, and depression when their conditions were doubted or dismissed by others. The emotional toll of constantly having to prove your disability can be overwhelming. Here's a quote for you. I often feel like I'm living in a world that doesn't believe me, wrote one anonymous contributor to The Mighty, a website for people with chronic conditions. Even doctors question what they can't see on a test result. That's true. It becomes a double battle, one against the condition itself and another against public perception. So, how does awareness help? Well, for starters, awareness opens the door to empathy. When people know more about what they can't see, they're more likely to react with compassion rather than suspicion. Awareness also educates workplaces, schools, and public institutions about the needs of people with invisible disabilities, whether that's flexible work hours, sensory-friendly spaces, or inclusive policies. In 2022, a report from the Job Accommodation Network showed that 58% of workplace accommodations cost nothing, and the rest typically cost under $500. That's a small price to pay for dignity and inclusion. And I know we just talked about that in a podcast earlier this season, but again, I wanted to include it here so you can see the full picture. But none of these changes can happen without awareness. Awareness leads to conversations, and conversations lead to change. Awareness is the first step toward acceptance, and only with acceptance can there be inclusion, said Susan Henderson, Executive Director of the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund. And she's absolutely right. Let's talk about advocacy. What does it mean to advocate for invisible disabilities? Advocacy isn't just marching in protest or testifying before Congress. Though those things are important, advocacy is also correcting a friend's misunderstanding. It's speaking up when someone uses ableist language. It's sharing your story even when it's scary because you know it might help someone else feel seen. It's standing up to content creators and influencers who are lying, but we'll get into that a little more later. Advocacy also includes pushing for policy change. For example, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, has been a huge step forward, but it wasn't designed with all invisible conditions in mind. Advocates are working to expand the scope of what's protected under law and to ensure that invisible disabilities are recognized just as seriously as visible ones are. And here's where personal stories play a huge role. A 2018 survey by the Ruderman, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, Family Foundation found that 89% of people who knew someone with a disability were more likely to support disability rights. That's the power of proximity and storytelling. When you share your experience, you invite others to understand, not just your struggles, but your strength. Now let's look at the flip side. What happens when we stay silent? Silence perpetuates stigma. It allows misinformation to spread and lets policy gaps remain unaddressed. It also isolates people who are already marginalized. In a culture where visibility often equals validity, silence around invisible disabilities can make people feel erased. Silence doesn't protect us, said Audre Lorde. It only ensures that we remain misunderstood. That quote resonates deeply with anyone who's ever stayed quiet to avoid judgment, discrimination, or rejection. But silence is a luxury we can't afford when people are being denied healthcare, accommodations, or even belief. If you're listening to this and you don't have an invisible disability yourself, you might be wondering, what can I do to help? First, believe people. You don't need to see someone's diagnosis to trust that they are struggling. Second, educate yourself. Follow reputable organizations. Read first-person stories. Ask thoughtful questions. Third, speak up, whether it's challenging stereotypes, advocating for more accessible environments, or supporting someone during a tough time. Your voice matters. As author and disability activist Alice Wong said, solidarity is a verb. Being an ally isn't passive, it's action-oriented. It's easy to get overwhelmed by how far we still have to go, but let's not forget how far we've come. Social media has given many people with invisible disabilities a platform to speak. Books, blogs, documentaries, and podcasts like this one are spreading awareness and building community. There are now hashtags like disability awareness, chronic illness warrior, and actually autistic that are making invisible lives visible. Campaigns by the Invisible Disabilities Association are growing every year as well. Progress may be slow, but it's real, and it's happening because of people like you, people who care, who speak, who act. But there's one more issue I want to address today, and it's kind of a difficult one, but it's really important. Now, I touched earlier on how social media is giving those with invisible disabilities a platform, and that is so true. But in recent years, we've seen a rise in influencers on social media platforms claiming to have rare or complex invisible illnesses. While many are legitimate and use their platforms to spread awareness and build community, there's also a darker trend. People faking or exaggerating disabilities for attention, sympathy, or clout. It's hard to talk about this without sounding judgmental, but the harm it causes to our community is real and measurable. When someone lies about having an invisible disability, it fuels skepticism towards those of us who live with these challenges every single day. It gives doubters and gatekeepers more ammunition. It makes it harder to advocate, to get accommodations, and to be believed. As writer Hannah Sawyer said in an article for Teen Vogue, when individuals fake disabilities, they delegitimize the very real experiences of those who live with them, experiences that are already questioned at every turn. It's not just that they're taking up space. They're disorienting the public's understanding of what these conditions look like. Real symptoms get reduced to dramatic performances. Nuanced realities are flattened into clickbait. Our lived truths become just one more thing to be doubted. According to a 2023 article in Psychology Today, this phenomenon has contributed to a measurable rise in medical skepticism among clinicians, especially when patients present with vague or subjective symptoms. This makes it harder for those with legitimate conditions to get accurate diagnosis or proper care. Now let's take this conversation a step further. It's one thing when a person exaggerates symptoms for sympathy among their personal circle. But what happens when someone builds an entire online brand around a health lie? When they claim to live with invisible conditions like PTSD, anemia, chronic illness, or rare genetic disorders, not as private truth, but as public persona? We've seen it happen, and it does real damage. So I've discussed it before, and I know you're probably sick of hearing about this influencer, but we're going to talk about her again because it's important. She's built her platform on significant weight loss of over 200 pounds, which I'm not trying to take that away from her. That is hard work. But in recent years, she's increasingly positioned herself as someone living with multiple invisible illnesses. One day it's PTSD, another it's OCD, chronic anemia, or PCOS. None of these conditions appear to be professionally diagnosed, and her narrative shifts frequently. Those who question her inconsistency or ask for clarity are often blocked, harassed, or even doxxed. And if you don't know what doxxed is, that is basically where she takes their personal information and posts it online so everybody can harass that person. While I won't name names here, I will say the contradictions haven't gone unnoticed. People are talking. There's snark pages dedicated to her. And for those of us who genuinely live with these diagnoses, it's frustrating because it takes our lived struggles and turns them into a performance. It dilutes real advocacy, and it makes public trust in invisible disabilities even harder to earn. I mean, when your story changes about why you have PTSD or what your OCD is, or one day you have chronic anemia and the next day you don't, these things are pretty telling that they're not the truth. But when people lie about serious invisible health conditions to gain followers, sympathy, or profit, they are not just deceiving their audience, they are harming an entire community. And this isn't new. I know we talked about this in an episode a couple weeks ago about influencers and how they harm the community, but I'm mentioning it again because I feel it is so important. And like I said, this isn't new. Take the case of Amanda C. Riley, now infamous from the Scamanda podcast. Riley faked having terminal cancer for nearly a decade. She blogged about her illness, accepted donations, and even claimed to be undergoing chemotherapy, all while collecting over $100,000 in fraudulent funds. She was eventually convicted of wire fraud in 2022 and sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Guys, I've had cancer. I've gone through chemo. I can prove all of this. It's not fun, and I don't understand people who lie about it. To me, that's just wrong. Then there's Belle Gibson, an Australian wellness influencer who falsely claimed she cured her terminal brain cancer with clean eating and natural remedies. She sold books and launched an app with her bogus story, only to be exposed and fined over $400,000 for misleading consumers. That's crazy. Now, these are extreme cases, yes, but the pattern is disturbingly familiar. Someone claims a condition, builds a brand, leverages sympathy, monetizes the narrative, and then leaves a trail of harm when the truth unravels. The result? Real people with real conditions get doubted even more. People with PTSD already struggle to be believed. Those with anemia, chronic pain, or autoimmune disorders are often dismissed because their symptoms fluctuate or aren't visible on the outside. When a public figure falsely claims those labels and gets caught, it feeds the worst instincts of society. The disbelief, the eye rolls, the accusations of faking it for attention. As disability activist Imani Barbaran put it, people faking disabilities are few and far between, but when they're loud, visible, and monetized, it makes it 10 times harder for the rest of us to be taken seriously. We already live in a world that questions invisible suffering. The last thing we need is performance on top of that. So let me say this clearly. If you're healthy, don't pretend you're not. If you're struggling, tell your truth, but be honest about the scope and the source. And if you're following someone online who changes their story more often than they do their underwear, ask yourself who benefits from the narrative. Because those of us with real, invisible disabilities, this isn't content, it's our life. And here's the thing, advocacy is built on trust. When that trust is broken by people chasing followers or sympathy, the entire movement is undermined. Let me be very clear. This isn't about gatekeeping. No one should have to prove their condition to strangers online. But there's a difference between protecting privacy and manufacturing a false narrative. And for those of us who live with these conditions every day, the cost of those lies is very real. So if you're an advocate, an ally, or a creator, please be thoughtful, please be honest, and please use your voice to uplift the truth, not manipulate it. Because people are watching, and more importantly, people are listening. And some of them, like you and me, are living this every single day. And I just want to say here, if anyone ever questions my validity, whether I really have the illnesses that I say I do, the disabilities that I say I do, all you have to do is ask. I do have proof, and I am happy to share that. Should I have to prove it? No, absolutely not. But when there's people out there lying and making things up, it makes it hard on us, and it makes us have to prove things, which really sucks, to be honest. So let's recap. Awareness leads to understanding. Understanding leads to empathy. Empathy leads to action, and action leads to change. Invisible disabilities may be hidden, but the people who live with them are not invisible. They're our coworkers, friends, neighbors, and loved ones, and they deserve to be seen, heard, and included every single day. Thank you so much for joining me today on Living Beyond the Invisible, A Walk with Heather. If you'd like to connect or learn more about the podcast, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Living Beyond the Invisible, A Walk with Heather. I'll have those linked along with resources and references from today's episode in the show notes. I'm Heather, and until next time, take care of yourself and always remember, some of the bravest battles we fight are the ones no one else can see.